Hi, this is Bob Green for nerdbob.com. In our previous videos, we discussed why we live in a world today where our e-portfolios are needed and how to establish those and a platform upon which to establish those. A simple Google search of the two words electronic portfolio bring back 1,520,000 results. So let's ask the question, why should we have an electronic portfolio system in schools? E-portfolios in schools are going to be the way that our students, and ourselves for that matter, establish our digital footprints and distinguish ourselves from other students, not only within our own school, but within the state, within the country, and within the world. Now, the challenge that we've had with e-portfolios in the past is that they've been a proprietary system, meaning that they require some type of hardware or software that could cost money to be ran on site, and it also limits the work of the student's audience. So we look at words that show up in this digication.com Wordle. And we see here, portfolio, student, development, reflection, program, showcase, e-portfolios, demonstrate. All of these are things that we can do through an e-portfolio system and gain feedback not only from our peers within the school, but our peers across town or across the state, across the country, or across the world. We look at this logo from Edudemic. Again, e-portfolios are coming up. Here's an excellent one from Information Week, and it shows how we have Google Notebook, Picasa, YouTube, Google Docs, digital audio clips, and all these things can be stored in Google Apps. And the same thing could be said for what we decided to use as our platform of Evernote. All these things that we're already doing, all these artifacts that we're already creating, could be stored somewhere that we can then make available to the public for feedback. And here's a great one. Personal information, digital documents, video, stories, audio files. So we start with family archives. You could do a family tree, informal learning, K-12 school. All of this stuff that you're doing can come into a single location. And that's the next question that we need to ask. Where does it go? When you submit your work to an e-portfolio system, where does that work go? Well, in the past, that work was usually stored on a local database within the school, or maybe through a third party, but it was never accessible, really. You had it there, but it wasn't really accessible to the wider audience. It was accessible only to those who had the access. The next question that we have to ask is, what does it measure, and what is the relevance? I remember when I was working on my associate's degree, we had to submit papers in classes where designated by the college. It was part of some program that they had that we had to do. The papers were typically centered around the topic of diversity, which oftentimes didn't have any relevance to the class at hand. The majority of my classes that I was taking at the time were technical classes. So you had me in a Microsoft programming or a Microsoft Windows Server 2003 class writing about diversity. Wouldn't it have been more relevant for me to be writing about how I could see Server 2003 having an advantage over Novell at the time? Remember, this was about 10, 12 years ago when I was taking this, so Novell was still around. And I guess the question I always asked was it measuring anything learned in that class? Now, we did get creative one time and write a paper on the college's lack of diversity within their computer network. You see, we were an all-Windows campus, and any talk of Mac or Linux was quickly dismissed by the IT department. Our instructor had a good laugh out of the paper, but he said that would not be acceptable to submit, to which our argument was it was relevant to the topic proposed, which was, where do you see areas within the campus community that lack diversity? We worked on this collaboratively, and it was a good effort, but it didn't come to fruition. Is it useful? When I create something, I want to know that what I created, through whether it be a digital artifact or whether it would be through a paper, is something that has a purpose. So how does Pistachio and Evernote change that? Well, Pistachio gives you that global audience. It takes what you're doing and moves it from the local audience of the classroom or the community and puts it out into the global audience, which then gives you feedback from different perspectives that you didn't have before. Learning and recall. As you use Pistachio to start showcasing your work, you can also use it to recall learning. So let's imagine that you created a diagram on the water cycle last year, and then in the science this year you were asked to recall the steps in the water cycle, and you're like, oh no, I don't remember what the steps were. But I remember I created this diagram. You can use Pistachio and Evernote and the tags within there to find that piece of work that you did from last year and to recall quickly what the water cycle steps are. Portfolio of work. So coming from Lima, Ohio, our reputation had always been built on your word and your character. Our audience was those we knew and the population from the area around us. I remember writing a book review that got published in the local newspaper. My audience suddenly went from being my mom and dad who reviewed it before I submitted it and the teacher to being the entire publication of the newspaper. So in the 21st century, with the audience now global, how do I go about distinguishing myself from the other Bob Greens in the world? That's where the Evernote and the Pistachio programs and nerdbob.com has come into play and has helped me to create my digital footprint. Portable. Previous systems had always seen the work submitted to it being locked in the system. It didn't travel with the student from grade to grade, school to school, or beyond. So when that student left the school, none of that work that the student did ever went with the student unless they took it with them. It didn't travel with the student when they went from 5th grade to 6th grade and changed buildings. It didn't go with that student upon graduation. Pistachio and Evernote allows for that data to be portable. It allows for you to easily move that data from one site to another. It allows for it to be exported. It allows for true ownership of the document by the student and allows them to display it how they wish. The next topic we'll take a look at is the legal side.